Hi Joam, welcome to the release video. 3.15 is released. What are we going to see in this release?
Hi, Valentin, and thanks for having me. 315 has turned out to be a feature-rich release. Lots of new things, lots of improvements, lots of small things that we can talk about later. So we're going to need a lot of time today to talk about it. Just on the top of my head, we have dashboards. We've got connectors to certain systems integrations. We've got SLAs. We've got the new palette editor. We've got third-party clients for the external worker. We've got REST debugging and inspect. We've got accessibility in the UI. Lots of technical improvements, which we can talk about in detail later. So yeah, the list is quite long today. It's really turned out to be a good release, a very good release. Yeah.
That's a really long list. With what should we get started, actually?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I think everybody loves pretty graphs, right? So let's get started with the dashboard, shall we?
Okay, let's start with those. Why did we introduce dashboard components with 3.15?
It's a very good question, Valentin. It's something that many customers have asked for. Now, one thing to take into account is that the data that we're using for the dashboards has always been there. You see, when you're working with Flowable, when you're executing processes or cases, we're storing this into the relational database. But at the same time, in the background, asynchronously, we're indexing this to Elasticsearch. And we're indexing this in a way that the data is just not a copy of the relational database. It's an optimized version tailored towards certain queries or dashboards. And what we've had added now,
searching and aggregation that we have that data.
Exactly.
Queryable mode.
Exactly. And this data has always been there. But what we've done now in 3.15 is actually exposed a user interface to build these queries at runtime. And that's what I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got work here.
And new dashboards as well.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Here we go. Well, you already see something here, but let's ignore that for a minute. I already was playing around with some demo data here. So let's just create a dashboard. And, my talent is definitely not finding out good names.
I mean, it's
yes, it's my dashboard.
It's also associated actually to your user, or?
Correct. So dashboards are user bound, which means that I can have a set of dashboards and the next person can have a different set of dashboards. Absolutely.
Okay.
So let's go. So this empty dashboard, there is one button here to edit it. Yeah. You go into this edit mode. You can see because there's now lines shown here. And there's a button, add component. Here we go.
There's basically a grid in here, and you can now add different components. And there are bar charts,
exactly.
Line charts. What else is there?
Pie charts, tables, and values. Here we go, right? And you see that I already did, this is a teaser for the next one. I actually already tried it out a bit with some custom components, and you see I didn't take time to put a description in there. That's why they look ugly. But we'll talk about that after this. These are the out-of-the-box components. So in 3.15, we ship with a set of things that apply to any kind of Flowable user. For example, let's just take one. Let's take the number of started process instances, for example. Right? It's a very generic. That's a line chart. So here we go. I need to give it a title, started process instances. I can then say, I want to group them by day, by week, by month, quarter, and year. I can give some custom colors here.
On a time basis, basically.
On a time basis. Yeah, let me show you. If I submit it, you already see it here. Exactly. Okay. So you already see that it's already showing me some data. Now, when I save it,
now you can easily adjust the size and also move it around.
Exactly.
You save
exactly. Exactly. Now it's frozen. Let's say in this kind of setup. What you see here.
That header there?
Yeah. So basically. It was empty, right? It was looking like this, but it was empty before because I was just editing it. But the moment you add components to your dashboard, they all contribute to the header. So even if I have, let's say, 10 components, they contribute to this header here. If they share the same parameter, for example, all of them, well, not all of them, but a lot of them share the process definition, there will be only one process definition filter. However, when you change something here, they will all listen to that change, right? I'll show that in a second.
So that also means when I would add now a case diagram, it would add case definitions there as filter as well.
Correct. I'll do that afterwards. It's a good test, actually. But let me first show you how this filtering works, right? So if, for example, if I take here, you see this is now my data. It's random data, really. So if I say now, this is the expense process, you see data goes down. It was way more than 1350 here. I can say things here like I want to filter on the last 3 months, on the last year, which looks like this. There's things here. Really cool is that you can also use variables. You can say here, build a dynamic variable.
Okay, so with that, I filter now on specific variables which are part of my processes. So it tells me here even the list of variables which are available. And I then can say they should be less than or larger than a specific.
Exactly. And this can be a quite advanced query. I mean, I can add like subgroups here with all kind of various ORs and other nested group here. You can see I built this.
Yeah.
Let me keep it simple.
People are already used to have kind of that filter for our condition builder. So that's now a similar way here for just searching for the variables.
Exactly. And I'm hoping that, because this is random data, I've been generating this on the background for this movie, that basically there is a rating variable. I know that. I just don't know it's going to be in this process. Let's have a look. Well, it is. You see, it was 13 something, and it's actually filtering down on those that have a rating larger than 5, which is pretty cool. To answer your question, right, let me just clear all the data again now. Oops, sorry, here we go. If I now add something for case definitions, for example, let me get, let's take a pie chart. They always have pretty colors. So let's just say I do this distribution, case instances, my cases. Here we go. It's going down there. Let's move it up.
Okay,
here we go.
So moving around is also possible.
Yeah. Nice. Here we go. And you see that, it has, actually you see here, I've been playing around with one instance, just trying out some things, which is funny. But you see that this now contributes all kind of parameters, but it also adds case definitions because it wasn't there and now it's there. So if I now filter it down, here we go. This is not changing because, there is no, the process definitions are only shown here. It doesn't listen to case definitions, but, here we go. So this is kind of
now use the start time, for example, then it would adjust both diagrams based on the start time, since both diagrams are listening to the start time.
You see here, now it's 1,000. If I remove it again, it's 4,000 here, right? So you see that it kind of works like that. Another cool feature that you can do is, if you say this one here, I'm trying to get a bit of data here. There's a button here. You might have noticed this, and this is actually exporting the data that's being used to aggregate this. So this is not, it's not going to...
For that single chart based on the filter that we have above.
Exactly. But it's not going to, you would expect it's kind of doing it 2 rows here, right? Like 2 entries. Actually, what it's going to do, let me click it.
It's the 20,000 rows or something like that.
Yes. Well, 2,000, I think. Let me check. Because, we're filtering down 2,000, right? Yes. And here we are, right? So if we're here, and let's see, 2,000 something rows, which probably adds up together. You see, this is actually the data that's been used to make this aggregation. So when you click that, behind the scenes, we're actually executing the query that is bound to this particular part. And this is a perfect segue to the next part I want to show you, which is how to build queries and how to build a custom dashboard component, because this is nice. But the power is really in customizing this, right?
Okay, so with your own data, basically, let's look into that next. What do we need to do to create our own dashboard component?
Yeah, very good question, Valentin. So first of all, you need to go to Flowable Design because that's where you build your models. Now, there's 2 parts about a dashboard component. There is the component itself, like how it's visualized to the screen, but it also needs a data source. And the data source for it is a query model. And in 3.15, we've added 2 new editors. Well, one of them is new, the other one is more improved. There is a dashboard component editor, obviously, and there is the improved query builder. So
the
let's start with that.
Query was already before there, but now it is basically improved from the usability.
Exactly.
So just create a new query.
Yeah, again, using my consistent naming pattern. Here we go. Before, you would see this UI, right, where you just build your Elasticsearch query with a free marker template. You would be able to do parameters, bind these parameters at runtime to dynamic queries.
Still can do that. You need to only write here your Elasticsearch queries, but for dashboards, there's a new way.
Exactly. So we have the builder way, where we really tried to hide all of these complex, low-level nitty-gritty details when writing a query. So let me show you how that looks like. There's 4 steps to it. Well, 3 actually in this case, because what I want to do is let's say I want to build a pie chart. I want to build a pie chart showing variable distribution, like showing how much do I have from each variable as a text. First thing I need to do in the builder, first step is I need to say, what's my source index? Well, I want to do this now on...
You do not directly say here that you would like to have a pie chart. You basically talk here about the information which you need to create the pie chart.
It's really important that this is the data source, right? So this is the data source that is going to give data to the dashboard components. One data source can actually be used by multiple components. You can build a query, and then, as I'll show you in a second, build multiple aggregations on top of that filtered data and reuse them across various components, which is a really powerful paradigm.
And now we say it's querying the process instances, one of the 4 different indices. So we are going to see in our pie chart process instances.
Exactly. Another really important thing here at the bottom is the save query, which is enabled by default. It might not look like much, but it's really important to think about this, because by default it's checked, which means that, as you can read here, I will only be able to see the data that I have access to, meaning data that I'm an assignee to, I'm an owner, I've got an identity link somehow, things that I have access to, I can see it in Flowable work.
And
now for a dashboard, when I uncheck it, it means that I will see across my tenant, which is something you generally will want for dashboards. Well, depends on the use case, of course, right? Well, that's why it's enabled by default, because you need to think about it. If you would disable this, you give the person using this query access to the whole wide data in your tenant, which for dashboards is often what you want. Now, there's an extra layer of security here. Even if you would uncheck this, your user still needs to have the right security permissions to actually see the data. So it's there's to see the data, there's a couple of steps which is necessary in enterprise environments, of course. But it's something that you need to think about. Now, I'm using the admin user, which means that I will be able to see anything anyway, right? For admin users, they always see everything.
They have permissions to everything. But actually, I think for admin users, just on a side note, there are some improvements in the security policy that you can limit the permissions there as well. But let's continue with the queries here.
Yeah. So we now said we want to query the process instances. And now we can build a filter. And this is a similar UI like the one we saw in the variable condition. I just add a couple of things here. And what you see here,
dynamic process mean?
Good question. Let me first say what non-dynamic is, meaning static. Right? So let's go here. Let's, for example, say I've got a static process. And I can type a key here, or I can select a process definition, process model from my app. Static means that the query, the resulting query from this builder, is going to have a hard-coded setting for the process definitions, meaning it's not going to query for a marketing campaign. If you remember our demo from before, this is this is a non-static. This is a dynamic
that's
process
dynamic
definition.
Because the user who is using the dashboard can decide what it is. And when we have it static, then the user is forced to just use exactly that process model.
Yes. But you still need to say, as I'm doing here, I'm going to, for example, say dynamic start time. Sorry, that's a static one. Where is the dynamic here? So say dynamic start time, which means that from a query point of view, because remember, we're here doing the query, I'm expecting data from the REST API or from the UI, which is going to send in the REST API call. I'm expecting a certain data in a certain format. If not, this query simply is not going to react to it. If I do here a change, well, and this is dynamic, but my query is not exposing it, is not saying I'm listening to it, it's not going to do anything.
Then it's just ignoring that value, or you don't even see it when you do not even have a chart on that, which is taking care about that value. That makes sense.
So what I'm doing here is I'm going to filter my process instances for this particular process definition, process model, and I'm going to allow a dynamic start and end time. The third tab is not really interesting for us, but I'm going to talk about it real quickly. We're building a pie chart, as I said. When I'm doing a pie chart, like I'm doing here, you're not interested in the data itself, right? Like the nitty-gritty details about this instance was started this time, ended this time, this is the assignees and stuff like that. You just are interested in the aggregations, in the grouping of data. However, when I'm building a table component, I am interested into that. And when I'm doing that, I might check here return results. And the return results will then allow me to select which fields do you want to return and do some things like paging, sorting, exposing more variables.
that you can configure then basically what you are able to do within your table. Okay.
Exactly. The query exposes this information then to the component, and the table component will be able to show that. Now, I could check this for my pie chart. It would return all this data, but my pie chart is not going to do anything with it. So from a performance point of view, it's useless that I'm actually returning it.
Yeah.
So let's save some bandwidth and not do it here. But for a table, you would need this. Yeah. The last one, which is really the most important part here, is the aggregation. Well, important for a pie chart at least. There's a lot of documentation
but also
here.
For the value or the line chart, probably that's the most important.
Yeah, exactly. All the things like a line chart is also showing a list of key values basically. Now this query, you can have multiple aggregations per query, meaning that the data that I've filtered, right, from filtering on cross definition and start and end time, this data I can apply various groupings, various aggregations to. For example, let me just show you, it's easier to talk about. I could just count them. That's the easiest. Just count how many results I get back. Or I could say, how many of these instances are actually completed, started, or active? I can group them by definition, which is kind of silly because I'm filtering down on one definition at this point, so there will be only one grouping. I can also do some things with variables. I could say, for example, I know that I have a certain variable, and what's the average? Could be an interesting one that you say, okay, what's the average last week? In that case, I could do a static last week in the query and just do average on that value. What I'm doing here for the marketing campaign, I know I have a product variable. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, generate me a distribution of the values, meaning that just count how many I've got of them.
How many you have per value. So
per
select which variable you would like to look for, and then what different texts you have in there. And you basically, when you limit the size, then you go ahead and take the top ones in there. So
because I know that I'm using a random generator for my data. So it's generating random words. So I've got a lot of permutations here. That's not really interesting to see in a pie chart because it's going to be small slices. So let's put this to 5, which is making sense.
Then
for a
you
pie
have
chart.
the 5 buckets with the most values probably.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, that's it. That's our query. So we're filtering down. We're aggregating. Let's now make a dashboard component.
The dashboard component is now the visualization for our query itself. So here we are going to see then or configure then how it looks like.
Correct. So what I'm doing here is, first of all, I need to say what is the type. Now we're building a pie chart, right? And you see that it changes now what I can do. If I would say it's a table, and again, a table doesn't aggregate data, it just shows data. You see, it removes the aggregations. So let's say pie chart. And what I can do now is I'm simply going to link to my query. And there's a lot going on now, right? It's actually introspecting the query model and seeing, what does this query expose? And is this compatible with the pie chart? Now, I can also go into the configuration. And
that gives us just default information, which we later on can then use when we add that specific dashboard component.
That's a suggestion we do to the user. They can change it if they want to do a different title, different color scheme. It's fine, they can do that. But this is the default suggestion. Now, I said before that it's introspecting the query model, right? And it's actually filtering down here on the aggregations it can display. Certain aggregations you cannot display in a pie chart. I'm thinking about like a stacked one. If you have, for example, one key, a date, for example, and you have multiple values for it, that you can show in a line chart, 2 different lines, but you can't show that in a pie chart. So the query editor, the dashboard component editor is smart enough to filter it down. Now, of course, I knew building a pie chart, so it's going to display
that we
this
need
one.
that. Okay.
Exactly. So that's it. I mean, realistically, I've been talking a lot here. You see that building a query without me talking would take you, what, a minute or something
a few seconds,
to do that? Yeah, and a dashboard component was even faster, like 30 seconds maybe tops to click this together. And that's really what we wanted to do in 3.15. But anyway, before we get all proud,
I would
let's see
also
how it looks like.
Exactly. See how it looks like.
Because I can say
so
all
therefore
things,
you
let's
need
see how
to
this
publish it. It's part of an app as always. And now we can either modify an existing or you are now adding a new dashboard.
Yes.
I think the new dashboard is pretty nice that we see how the header adapts to the information which we have provided.
True, good point. And you see that my custom component is now showing up in the component catalog. It's a really cool custom pie chart component. So let's add it.
And the really cool is actually the description which you added to the component, so that value is also reused.
Yeah.
And we see we have now a custom component.
Again,
that's really
this is
nice.
random data. You see also the words it's been generating is just permutations of random things. Not really interesting, but it shows you the ideas, right? Is that that remember we used? Let me just quickly show you again in the filtering.
You use dynamic start time and dynamic end time, and that's actually what we see then in the header.
Exactly. But the process is not here, right? The process, if you would make this dynamic, the process would show like this one here, right? But it isn't because we've statically configured it. It's hard coded, so it's only going to show me this data. This is really the power of the dashboard components. I can make a custom definition, a custom model, and I can add the dashboard component specific for that model into the same app. And this really makes it easy to build customized dashboards. Again, just showing that this works, right? I mean, let's just quickly see. There's not much data here because I've got so many different permutations, but let's hope it at least changes a bit. Well, you see, it does. It went from 2 to 3.
It changes,
Yeah, exactly. So here we go, right?
Yeah, that's really
does
cool.
change. Yeah. And this is just, I mean, what we've done in 3.15 is really built the foundations for this, let's say, runtime dashboards things, thought about dashboard components, improve the query editor, and what we have now in 3.15 going forward is the foundations needed to build on top of this. I mean, you can imagine there's way more different style of components, options for components. I mean, when you start doing dashboards, that's a whole world on itself. There's a lot of things in our roadmap, in our heads that we want to do on this foundational work that's done in 3.15. But at least in 3.15, what's really cool now is you can start playing around with your data, start thinking about custom components, how you want to visualize them, and build your own really cool dashboard because it's
everybody can really build and customize the dashboard as they want. I mean, you can even change the colors, adapt it as it should look like, and with that you have a really cool dashboard then at the end.
Yeah, and as you can see, it's really it's really cool just to play around with it, right? Just to say, if I want to just add some, just randomly a table, for example, just trying out some things here. You can see that this table, here we go. I just put it here. This is now.
That also has actually your marketing campaign in there, which we have seen above. We could build here our own custom component that we just have the marketing campaign, and it's not dynamic anymore. So I think
and I can configure this, cool columns and whatever. Yeah, absolutely. See, just some. I'm just playing around with this, on rehearsed.
See that, but I think we should go to the next topic since I think there's still a lot on our list. So let's move on to SLAs, even if dashboards are really cool.
All right, thank you, Vanden.
Now the next topics are SLAs. So what do we have to show there, Joram?
Right. So I already prepared a little demo here to show the new SLA model, basically. It's a new editor in 3.15. Let's just show it. I think the best is to just go through it and see what it does. So I created a very, very simple process, right? I mean, nothing more than just a task. It's not the point of this particular demo. But what's new here is you can see here at the bottom of the screen is that you can now, for a task, say it follows these SLA rules, this particular SLA model. So when I click it, you go to the new SLA editor, the new modeler.
So that's basically a new model which we have, which defines basically our SLA models itself. We see here then the basic configuration.
Exactly. And so let me just walk you through it, right? What this model does is, there is a setting. This basically means that the SLAs, like the restrictions around the task, when things should be done, what kind of time frame should it use? And here we're saying, well, select some kind of business calendar, and we're using a standard Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 o'clock in the evening kind of thing, which means that there won't be any notifications being sent when you're not within that time frame. You're not going to get something in the week. There's 3 types of SLAs you can define. There's only completion time, which means that it looks at your task completion. Reaction time. Reaction kind of means that the moment you touch the task, meaning that you say, okay, I am going to work on it. That's what basically.
So there's actually a button in the work user interface where you can say you're now starting to work on that.
Exactly.
And as soon as that time basically stops, that's your first reaction to the task.
Exactly. And so because I selected now completion and reaction, I need to set
Mm-hmm.
these two. And I've
Yeah.
taken some easy times here just for demo purposes.
Yeah.
Is that we're expecting a reaction within 1 minute, we're expecting a
Yeah.
completion within 2 minutes. Not really realistic, but for demo
Mm.
purposes, you can see where we're using this. Second step is what you can do is that when the task gets initialized, you can do multiple things here.
Mm-hmm.
I now pre-configure this just because it's
Yeah.
quite boring to see me type.
Yeah.
To send an email, there is a couple of other actions here you can do.
Okay. So
And
changing the
you can gather
priority,
them
the
together. Yeah.
assignment, and you can even start a process when I see that right
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah.
we
So
can
if you
go
have
ahead.
a fully, yeah, if you have a process that you want to run on task initialization, you can configure it here and do
Mm-hmm.
all things. Now, a classic use case, and that's why I selected it, is of course sending out an email that you have a new
Yeah.
task in your inbox, basically. Now, what I did here, I just sent some email
Yeah.
things. The subject, I actually generated
And uh, I
the
was
text
about
here,
to
which
say you really wrote a nice text in here, but you
it's
generated
all
one for us.
ChatGPT generated, asked to
Yeah. I
generate
see.
a friendly email for a new
Yeah.
task, and that's what it came
And
up with.
and that is happening when we create that task. So that is basically
Yes,
happening at the beginning, while
correct.
the
While this one here,
escalation also is then happening
yeah,
later on.
exactly. So we've got a couple of steps here. We're just basically sending two different things here. First one is that we want to send an email. Again, you can do
Mm-hmm.
different things. Again, here, same as before. You can also, and this makes more sense maybe, to start a new process when things escalate, right? You can
Yeah.
configure this centrally in your SLA model. But here what we're going to do is that we're going to send, remember we put it to 1 minute, so we're going to send
Mm-hmm.
30 seconds before that 1 minute, so after
So
30
after
seconds,
30 seconds, yeah.
yeah, we're
Okay,
going to
I
send an
understand.
email that, hey, watch out, you've got an upcoming deadline.
Mm-hmm.
You might need to pay attention to this again. ChatGPT generated.
Yeah.
It's time for us to start working on this to meet our goals. Then we have another one. We
Mm-hmm.
also send an email before the completion of this task, so 30 seconds before that.
Yeah.
We're going to send an email that, yeah, it's really time now. Do this
Yeah.
task and you
Hurry up.
complete this task. Yeah,
Okay,
basically
how
that's
does
what it
that
means.
I mean, can we execute that to see basically what is coming out of that?
Yeah, of course. So let's just now save it and publish it to our system,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
So create new, trying to find my
Yeah.
review, important review, really
Let's do
important.
that review.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I
there's not
also
even
use
a
it.
form in there. I mean, typically you would have a form in there
Yeah,
which you can
of course.
fill
This is
out.
the point. The point is really as a lazy. And you
But
can see that I've got this is a tool I've been using for more than a decade. It's a really simple
yeah,
application. Just
that's how it looks like.
yeah, I think it's
Okay.
2005 it was made or something. But it does
Yeah.
the job, right? You say,
Yeah.
listen to this email port, and basically it
Yeah.
shows me the email. It shows
That's
that
the
a student
first email.
employee.
That's the one which we wrote for initialization. So directly at the
Exactly.
beginning.
And
Yeah, that
hopefully
makes
that,
sense.
by now, we've talked long enough, yes, that the second
Yeah.
email is coming in,
Okay.
and that basically it's telling
Not
me that I really need to do the email. Again, there could
not the
be
email, the
a
task basically. Yeah.
Ah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But basically, I could start a process now. I could change the priority. I could do all the actions you saw, right?
Yeah.
If I have the chat enabled, I can actually send a chat message in a conversation and stuff like that. So there's a
Yeah.
plethora of things you can do
Yeah.
with this. And of course, we have to talk for a minute now to get
Yeah.
that email. But you see that, trust me,
Yeah,
this all
but
works.
actually you could
But yeah,
press now the start process button here in the background, since that's the button with which you stop the reaction time. So now
correct,
the reaction time
correct.
is stopped and we can
It
continue
stopped. Yeah,
basically, and we
yeah,
only need to wait for the completion time that we get
yeah.
a reminder. Obviously, we could go ahead and complete the task and we wouldn't receive another email.
Exactly.
But in this
Yeah.
way, when we would like to see the email, we need to talk for another minute. So let's
Yeah,
see by
we should
just
have put that to
talking. There we
there it
go.
is. Hooray, good job, Valentin. Here we go. There we go. There's our escalation email saying that we really, really need to do our
Yeah,
work and
yeah.
yeah, we should hurry up.
But
So yeah, that's
that's
in a
actually what
nutshell.
we just did. We did do our
Yeah,
work and explained you what the SLA is inside Flowable Work. And I think with that we
yeah.
can already go to the next topic. Or would you
Cool.
like
Thank you.
to add
Oh,
something?
external workers. I think I feel now in a good mood for external
Yeah.
workers.
That sounds good. So let's start with that. So let's continue. The external workers are actually really nice to go ahead and call customized software. So Joram,
Mhm.
what can you show us?
Yeah. So I've created a very simple case model. Could also have been a process model. It's the same story. But basically, an external worker is a point in your case or your process where you want to say, hey, I've got a bit of work that needs to be done on an external system. And my case or my process is simply going to wait until I get that back. And the external worker works quite simple. You can write your logic in pretty much any language that speaks HTTP, because what happens the moment you execute an external worker task, it creates a job on a particular, let's say, implicit queue. In this case, and this is my external worker task, is going to put the fact that I need to do some work on my topic. And I can now write code in any language querying this REST API saying, hey, do you have work for me on this my topic, right? And this is how you can do. The case will wait until you say, I'm done, let's continue.
At the end, it's a message queue, basically, just without the message queue. Everything is based on HTTP. Somebody is calling Flowable, I would like to have some work.
Exactly.
Then we give the work back, and once they are done, basically, they say what the result is.
That's indeed it. And we found that, setting up a message queue infrastructure and all of that is a lot of work. It's not as simple as simply doing an HTTP call, right? I can write a very simple script, probably even in Bash, that calls out with curl to HTTP and do something. So the threshold to build these external workers is super low. And we'll do that in 30 seconds. But first, of course, I need work to be done. So what I'm going to do...
Let's start a case, publish it.
Exactly, publish it. And basically... Let's start it now, and here we go. It's now, it's now there. You just executed it. But let's see what we have. If we go to github.com, you see there's implementations out of the box for different languages. Again, if you're using some other language, I'm thinking
you can always call the REST API.
Exactly. So, I mean, this is simply making it nicer for you, but the core is simply calling a REST API. Let's do Python, shall we? Because Python these days is super popular with all the AI stuff, machine learning stuff. And let's see what's there. You see there's a nice README here that walks you through it. The first thing I need to do, and maybe let's do that while we talk, is I need to install a third-party dependency on this library.
That's actually, as for the others, also in a public repository, so you can just download it with the package manager. You don't need to authenticate or anything like that, so it's really easy to use. And I mean, talking about the README while that is doing something did not work since it was so fast. You can now already start creating your first Python script, which is using our external worker. So let's...
here we go. So this is opening up Visual Studio, and let's just see, there's a sample here.
There's two samples. Yeah.
Now, there is a cloud one, there's a local one. It's interesting to talk about that because, of course, in the Flowable clouds, writing external workers is super easy, and it's also the way to add custom logic to your processes, to your cases. Because we don't allow you, of course, to change things on the cloud spot. It's the cloud, so you can't. You can use scripts, of course, but an alternative is to write external workers and connect to the cloud with an external worker. Now, you're not going to use basic auth there. You're going to use tokens there, and this, this README is also explaining how to do that. But I'm running local, so let's just copy paste this.
Let's take that. That is going against my topic. That's actually the same, I think, which you configured for.
I already knew what I'm going to do, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the host is also localhost 8080/flowable work by accident.
I hope so.
As well. And admin test are our credentials. And then we have in the middle line 6 to 8 that little function. And I think that's the function which is executed whenever we get a job. So we will print the ID of our job and then successfully complete the job before we go ahead.
Of course. What you will do here is you will write your real business logic. Through this builder, you also get access to your variables of your process or case. You can use them, do whatever logic you want to execute, and then at the end you say success or you say not success, and it gives it back, which will then continue that particular instance of the external worker task for that particular case instance.
And I think interesting to mention here is also for this not success, you have two different kinds. You have the CMMN terminate or BPMN error, depending on what you are using, which is more like a business error. And then you have the fail to go ahead and say, please roll back everything. I cannot complete that job because an error on my side.
Yeah, exactly. That's another interesting thing, right? Just show you what Valentin was talking about. Really quickly, just showing unrehearsed is that if you've got an external worker, basically, if I can find
It's
it
at the
here, here's the
bottom,
bottom.
yeah, the
Yeah.
last one.
And what Valentin was talking about, and I think that's really
That's
cool, is
the
that you can have a boundary event and basically say I have an error
our boundary
and put this,
event. Yeah, and with
and then
that you can then
escalate.
react on
Yeah,
this based on
there
your
we go.
model, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so let's run this now, right? We've
Yeah.
been talking a lot. Let's just run this now,
Yeah,
and
and you
here we
just
go.
need to imagine the missing sequence flows Jerome did not model, since he was
Yeah,
just coming up with that ad hoc. But now we can
yeah,
execute our external worker, and what we are
yeah,
seeing actually is that there is already the one job which we have had, so that job is now completed. And I think when you go
yeah,
back to work, you should see that as
yeah.
well here. So
I
when
should
you
see
click
now in the
now
open
on
task
see
exactly that
data,
it continued.
yeah,
Yeah, it's now in the see data task, and
yeah.
basically, yeah, it
We
worked.
don't have
Not
any
not much
data.
to it.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
didn't send any data,
yeah.
so that's fair.
Exactly.
No,
Now, just talking about other languages, I do have another example here. Let me quickly
yeah,
show you. If you're using Java,
and
you can use plain Java, in any kind of Java
yeah,
environment, and we have a
that's
library for
yeah,
that.
that's
And this
described
is
in the
Spring Boot.
README file, but that one here
It
is the
is.
Spring Boot one. Yes, that's
This
also
is Spring Boot
described in the
one.
README file. That's really simple.
Exactly.
It's just one simple
It
annotation. Add
it is. Yeah.
flowable
So
worker, and then you're ready
yeah.
to go.
Yeah, and what you can see here, right, is that here I'm actually doing success, but I'm also passing additional variables
Yeah,
to this, which then will
yeah,
be populated or be sent into my process or case
yeah,
instance and do things like that. There's all kind
S-
of settings here, advanced
yeah.
settings.
Mm-hmm.
I can, lock the job. We haven't talked about that. That's all
Yeah,
in documentation, but I can say it needs to be locked for so long, and then if I'm not
yeah,
responding, somebody else can take over. You can have multiple
yeah,
instances. You can have, change how many times you're
yeah,
going to check for new work. You can have concurrency,
yeah,
meaning I have a thread pool that you can use to do, advanced work and spread this over a thread pool. Anyway, that's really
yeah,
advanced. What I wanted to show you today is how easy it is to get going
yeah.
with these external worker clients, and
And
especially if you're using the cloud, how easy it is to do that.
yeah, and there we can actually see that you are a Java guy, since those properties, especially to configure the logs and so on, they are also available for the other languages. But
Yes.
since Yorm is most used to Java, that's the
Yeah.
place where he showed it to you. I mean,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
also configure the log and so on for the
Yeah.
Python,
Yeah.
Node.js, and so on clients as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I'm
So,
definitely, I'm an
yeah,
old school guy.
yeah. And since we
Yeah.
are already talking about REST, we are going to continue actually with service registry and look at the REST things over there. Now in Flowable Inspect, we have one main addition. What is it, Joram?
Yeah, it's basically something that many customers have asked for, is that when you're modeling, especially REST-based service registry tasks, it's sometimes difficult to find bugs or to say, oh, I made a mistake here. And that's exactly what we're trying to do now. Inspect, as the name implies, allows you to inspect what went over the wire, right? And to demonstrate this, I made this very simple process. Again, it's demoware, nothing fancy.
Yep.
It's calling out to a third-party service that I already created. It's running on my local machine. It only has one operation, which is find a customer by ID.
So
and
simple demo service, and we are not
Demo
just
service.
executing our process,
Yeah.
which you have over here, and then we see
Yeah.
basically what happened on our
Yeah.
HTTP layer at the end, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I have also mapped the boundary event here that if something happened, that you want to say
Yeah.
that we have a problem. So let's see what it does at runtime.
Okay, yeah, publish, that makes sense, and then let's execute it.
Yep, let's try to find it. Here we go, and here we go.
Yeah, we have a problem.
We
so
have a
let's
problem.
fix it.
We have a problem. Yeah. Well, let's first see where the problem is, right? Because before we couldn't see this.
You open Inspect right now, and that was actually behind me, that button. I mean, normally you open it through the user menu when it's already open,
exactly.
then you can collapse it. And now here we are. Go ahead.
There's a new tab in the Inspect. In the Inspect tab, there's a new drop-down value here, which is Service Registry, and so it's going to log all of the things it does. And you already see the problem here is a 404.
Okay.
Let's inspect it. You see we send in an ID, but it's simply not found. And, I can spot, I don't know if you can spot the problem, Valentin.
Yeah, it's pretty small for me, but I think, we can see that There's a typo actually in customer. Yeah, now we can see it. Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's fix that. Let's go into our service. Oh, here's the service. Let's go into
Obviously,
our operation.
those errors could be different errors. I mean, even in the
Yeah,
external service, something could go wrong. You're not receiving the data you want to. The mapping is
exactly.
not
The
what you
timeout.
expect.
Yeah,
All of those things you can figure out with that feature
yeah,
in Inspect now.
yeah. So let's go.
And when you
Run it now.
recreate it now, okay, now the process went through. We basically received our customer, and the great thing
Yeah,
is
and
we
you
see
see
now here the full body response which was coming back. So we
exactly.
can now do our mapping based on that
And
response.
check whether our mapping is fine and whether we make a mistake or whatever. So, I mean, something that might look small, but is going to make a huge boost in when you're actually building these REST-backed service registry tasks. And yeah, it's going to save you a lot of time by not having to use other tools. You can just run it directly in Work, which is great.
I mean, sometimes you cannot even run a network sniffer to find out what is sent there. So that is really helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, integrations is our next topic. I think there we are going to start with SharePoint. What is new with SharePoint and Flowable, Johan?
Yeah, good question. So we have now support for selecting files from SharePoint and either linking them, that the content remains in SharePoint, or copying the content over to Flow. Let me just quickly show that. I have a very simple example here in my SharePoint demo app. A very simple process, literally just one task. That's not the point of this demo. But if you look in the form, you can see that there's a new option here. If I go to the attachment tab here, you can see that the source, that's a new thing in 3.15, the source can now be local, and I've now already selected SharePoint. And what I was talking about before, I can now select whether or not I want to allow to store a copy of the content in Flowable, or I want to leave it in SharePoint. And whenever I want to access it in a process, in a case, or just want to view the content, it's going to go to SharePoint and get that content. Let me show
probably here we can go ahead and say we would like to have files which are just coming from local, or which are coming from SharePoint, or from both, what is what you have selected. And then how are they basically going to be stored? So either it's a reference to the SharePoint document. So when you update it in SharePoint, it will update in Flowable as well.
Automatically, the content, if you view it in Flowable, the content will automatically have been updated. That's correct. I'm going to publish it to my work system here. Here we go. And let's start the process. SharePoint process. Say it's a really simple one. There we go. There's a button here. That's because I enabled beyond the local files.
So when you click at the top, then it will again go to your local dialog. And when you click down
and this is a SharePoint site that we've configured. I've configured my Flowable Work with the credentials and all of that. There is a documentation on how to do that. And I can see the folders here. So if I select, for example, product team, documents, I'm just going to select something random, maybe this one, and submit.
Okay, you could have selected even multiple files. That's also pretty cool.
And so let me complete it.
And now it's just when you uploaded it, only that now it is a reference to SharePoint actually. So
correct. So when I click it now, let me just click it here, right? Let me just click it. And what happens behind the scenes is it's going to SharePoint, get that content, and it's going to display now the content to me. At no point in Flowable, in the database of Flowable, we have stored a copy of this content, which is a powerful thing. So you can see this is living in SharePoint, and it's referenced here.
And in case you are signed into SharePoint as well, then you could press the Open in SharePoint button there at top to then directly go to the document in SharePoint. Indeed. And that's really cool.
Yeah, but that's it.
Talking about integrations, I think there's one more thing which you want to show.
Correct. Yep, I already had it prepared here. If you were watching before, it's the OpenAPI import. So it's empty because what I want to do is let me quickly go to create and then generate. I can now select OpenAPI or Swagger as it was called before.
And I see also there's a Salesforce when you go back.
Yeah, good point. I mean, we've demoed Salesforce in the Flowfest presentation. You and me together, Valentin. I think if you want to see how that looks like, we have a full demo of that in our Flowfest presentation of last month or 2 months ago. If you are interested in that, just go check it there. Let's now try the OpenAPI thing. I think. Let's see. I have one on my file
So
system.
you upload it
Go.
from your local file system there, and
Yep. And let
then
me just.
okay.
There are a few settings here. I'm going to leave them all
Mm-hmm.
default. If I want to fiddle with
Yeah.
things like the key that's being generated and other things, I can do it here.
Yeah.
But let's
If
the
if you
demo.
would like to have a data dictionary or just a service, basically, that you
Yeah.
can decide there.
Yeah.
I think you
Exactly.
went now for both, and now we already
Yeah.
see the list of services which will be generated for our service model.
And let's see what happens if I do that. Here we go.
Okay.
I got a service model. And all the things, all the operations that were described in the Swagger documentation, Open API documentation, they are there. If I open up this one, you see that the URLs are set, the method is set, it's all that's passing the right thing here.
Then
I've got
we
an
have
input
an input
parameter
parameter.
and stuff. Yeah, and stuff like that. Which saves me a lot of time, right? Remember that otherwise I would have to type all of this one by one for each of these operations, and that's just a lot of time, which is now saved.
You can now still go ahead and configure it. You could override something like the URL with properties or directly in here as well.
Whatever I want to do here, I can just do it, right? This is helping me get to that first kind of hurdle and lots of error-prone work that's now taken out of my hands, and I can continue with the real work, right?
That's perfect. So with that, we have REST APIs basically easily. Perfect. Thank you. Now we continue actually with converting PDFs. What do we have there, Joram?
Yeah, it's a new task in the process and case palettes, but it's something that a lot of people have asked us for, so here it is. So I've got a small example here, demo process. Again, the process is very simple, just to show you what this new task is about. As you can see here, there is a new conversion task here, and with a couple of properties. All the ones you would expect, right? You need an input document. So in this particular demo, I have an attached component from a form. What I want to, what the format is of the inputs. And then you see there's like Word, Excel, and some others there. How I want to store the document name. How I want to store the variable, right? If I want to reference and do things with it later in the process.
And you can even configure the compliance. That's nice.
I mean, you can say no compliance, 1A, 1B. I know, I don't know the details, but I know customers have asked for this particular feature. So
indeed.
It is. All right, let me publish it. I mean, there's nothing more, but it's a cool little task and worthwhile mentioning in this video. Let's go to work, and let's say the convert Word to PDF.
Okay, then you select the file. We could have actually enabled here SharePoint, then it would work with the SharePoint from before. But I see you also have that file on your local machine. Okay.
Exactly.
Now let's run that.
Yep. There we go. I mean, it's now converting it to PDF.
Yeah.
Which, depending on the files, could be complex, could be quick.
Yeah.
But you see here's my PDF.
We already have the PDF here.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And that's it. Pretty much nothing more to it, but I think it was worthwhile mentioning here.
Yeah. Then I think the next one is also in the front end area. So we have a groupable data table now. I mean, the data table was already there before, but what is the new thing now?
Well, there's a new thing here. Again, something that people have asked for is that if you have a data table, you can now actually configure a group by, which is, I mean, this depending on the data you have. In this particular case, I've got a category, and I want to group them by a certain value. In this case, I've got a dark and a light category, and I want to put the rows in a grouping in the data table. Let me show you how that looks like. Here we go. And here we go.
Okay,
and if you go now, you see the page.
Yeah.
Again, nothing major, but it's a cool little thing here that the data is now grouped by the category. My data, of course.
The category is basically at the front, and we can select which category it is and see then the content.
Exactly. And that's it. Something, little and nice to make your tables better.
And I think that small little switcher component there at the top is new as well, also that exportable.
Sorry. I already forgot. This is a switcher component, which is a Boolean one. People have asked to have this as a representation of a checkbox, and here it is. So that's what it does. And you can see here,
you see the export button. Yes, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember, because I forgot about it.
I think next one on my list here is the view of variables. So basically the variable
Yeah,
overview, which we have, I
yeah,
think inside the, yeah, you have the loan app already to demo
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And
So I took the loan app because it has quite a bit of models here. If I go into the loan case and I go into the variable viewer here, right? You can see it shows all the variables in this whole hierarchy of
yeah,
models. I can go into it and I can filter on various things at the top. I can, for
yeah,
example, say I know there's a few with date,
okay,
expiry date, for example, and you can see that
yeah,
on these particular forms, right, the passport details form, the driving license form, that this particular date is being written.
yeah.
So let me open it up.
So we
Here we
basically
go. You
see
see that
where this
here.
variable is created, and even if we would
Exactly.
read that variable, we would see those usages then basically as
Exactly.
well.
Exactly.
So when we
Exactly. So
use
yeah, that's
that
the
as
variable
part of
viewer. I
our,
think it's
yeah,
it's a very useful feature for people that have large
yeah,
hierarchies to know, okay, where is this particular variable coming from and where is it used? So really
yeah,
useful if you're building real life
yeah,
huge models.
yeah. Obviously, model hierarchies and not just the hierarchies in the company.
No, no,
Now,
no. Yeah, exactly.
okay, then also for the models and the relations, especially with those hierarchies, when we
Yeah.
come from that, you can see and visualize them as well. What is there basically
Yes,
available?
true. Let me just filter on the process because I don't. Yeah, here's the
Yeah.
process. I couldn't remember the name. Basically, if you have a model, any model really, and you go into the usage here, if you click that options menu here, you can actually
Yeah.
see where this particular, where it's being used. And this one is simple,
Okay.
right?
That's
The
just in the
case
case which we
model,
have seen. Yeah.
exactly, it's referencing the process as we expected. But it's also showing what the other models are that it's using. And you can see here
Yeah.
it has a couple of forms, it has a decision table, and it's also using a template model.
Yeah.
So this is really good to give you a quick overview of the hierarchy as we were talking about,
Yeah.
right? And I can just click on really any here, and it opens it up. Here we go.
Yeah.
So neat little feature, but if you're building complex models, complex apps, really useful to
Yeah.
have.
That's really nice. And then I think the last thing to demo for you is or at least show, is the dynamic shared workspaces. So there's a
Yeah,
concept of a shared workspace which you can use
correct.
basically, and that is
Yeah.
also for each workspace differently. Or
Yeah. So basically, for each workspace you have, and let me just quickly show you. I've got a couple of them here already. For each of those workspaces, you can actually say what is the shared workspace. And the idea here is that once you set it, those models in that workspace will also pop up in this particular workspace. So it's really like, as you can see here, the product team has a workspace, the
yeah,
sales team has a workspace. But if they share models, as would be common in any kind of company, they can go into a shared workspace, and all these models there, I can reference them, use them in my product team workspace as if they were there. So it's really like
yeah,
everything you want to share across teams,
yeah.
across workspaces, whatever you do with your workspaces, right? That's up to you. You can put your shared stuff in those workspaces, and that's it.
So
Neat feature,
I,
but
as
very powerful.
assuming I have, for example, a decision table which is figuring out the license which I need, then I
Yeah,
could use that now in my release video workspace as well
yeah,
as in the sales workspace as well, when I
exactly.
use the same shared workspace in which that model
Correct,
is.
correct, correct. And when you export or publish your app, then
Yep.
it will look into the workspace and in the shared workspace to gather all these models and publish them into your runtime,
Yep.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, there are a lot of smaller improvements as well there, but there are also some technical things. And let's quickly talk
Correct.
about those technical things. One
Yeah.
of the items here is the Spring Boot 3 support, which we added with the
Yeah.
3.15 release.
Yeah. So Spring Boot 3 is a necessary upgrade for the simple reason that Spring Boot 2X is end of life. And yeah, you have to upgrade. Now, with Spring Boot 3, this also comes with the requirements of Java 21, basically. And it means that you now have to run all your stuff with that new Java. And it comes with a lot of improvements, obviously.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that.
Cool. Then we also did an open source release. So the open source release 7.0.0.
For the same reason as
Yeah.
before, right? That comes with Spring Boot 3, and that requires an upgrade of your JDK, which means that we now decided to go with version 7 just to show the difference between the 6 branch and the 6 version line and the 7 version line. But the upgrade is seamless. You go from 6 to 7 as always, in backwards compatibility, and that's it.
Then we also support 2 new databases, Azure SQL Server as well as Aurora DB.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, not much to say about that, except, it's supported. Supported for us means that we run our automated QA on top of it. So we have a lot of tests, unit tests, that run basically every time we make a change in the product code, run every day, and check whether all of this works. Azure SQL is in there now, Aurora DB is in there now, and we've got quite a couple of customers that are running on those particular databases, especially Azure SQL. So it's important to have it in our supported stack.
Yeah. And the last item on my list is basically the ARM64 support for the Docker images, where you are probably really happy as an MacBook user.
Yes, exactly. So basically, before it it worked, right? You could run those Docker images that were not built for ARM64 on an M1, M2, and 3 MacBook, but there were some downsides. You had to configure stuff. There was going some layers of interpretation. It wasn't super experienced. With the native support for ARM64 images, that's gone now. You can just run it as is, and really convenient and fun.
Perfect. And with that, I think the only thing left to say basically is that you should try it out. There are a lot of small improvements as well. Thank you, Joram, for joining.
We briefly touched only the highlights of this release. There's many more improvements across the board, and it's, as always, it's our best release ever.
Thank you. See you next time.